Please welcome the panel on 2024, What Matters Most in Marketing, moderated by Executive Director of Marketing and Communications at the Milken Institute, Michelle Stevenson.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. We're very excited to have this conversation. Marketing in 2024, well, that can mean a lot of things, but we are going to bring to life today with this amazing panel in front of you, the 3 E's. So we're going to focus on entertainment, the environment, and the election. Barbie, Taylor Swift, Beyonce, a new bar was set when it comes to entertainment marketing last year. Last year was also the hottest year on record, and so the expectation for brands to step into the void when it comes to climate change has never been greater. And of course, there's an election that we're staring down here in the US, as well as elections that are taking place across the globe, which provides an opportunity for all of us to get involved. We're going to focus the conversation, but we do want it to be a conversation. So as we go down the line, if anyone wants to jump in on anyone else's point or, make it a dialogue, let's certainly be sure to do that. Thank you all for being here today. And before we get started, I'd like to do a little bit of framing. So just running down the line with all of you and get your thoughts on brand loyalty, because I think the conversation that we're going to have today is going to be influenced through the lens of if you feel like your consumers and your audiences are along for the ride with you, or if you feel like every day you're fighting for their attention, you are trying to make that meaningful connection and facing the headwinds. So I know we've got people both on the brand side and then on the agency side. So those, in terms of who those brand loyalists are, is going to be a little bit different. But I'd just like to get some stage setting on that. So Kathy, kick us off.
First. Thank you so much.
You're first.
Thanks for having me here. Brand loyalty. Oh my goodness. Well, I work for the Washington Post. So, I think it just goes without saying that trust is what I think about when I think about brand loyalty. And we're a habit-forming business. The news is something we expect people to subscribe to and pay for. And in order to do that, it's really imperative that we have trust. And you establish trust through being relevant, timely, credible, delivering information where people need it, want it, in ways that they want to consume it. And I would just stress the nonpartisanship. So that's what I think about when I think of brand loyalty for us.
Great.
Awesome. Brand loyalty, I think, has changed dramatically, and in the sense that, I remember my grandfather saying things like, "I'll only ever drive a Ford. It doesn't matter what happens, I'll always drive a Ford." And I think that, in the world of social media and how quickly people's attention spans are dwindling, it's very difficult to now connect with folks from a brand loyalty perspective that lasts a long time. So it's almost crafting your brand to understand how to be in the moment and almost build relationships with people, where brands are now seen as almost like a consumer or a peer. And that's hard, right? And it's not something that you can do an ad campaign in January and it lasts for 3 years, right? So, when you think about the world of social media and how things are really affecting that connection between a brand and a person, it just makes the onuses on brands so much more difficult and so much more consistent, where they need to craft what brand loyalty means almost every single day.
Wow, I love this already. I am the outlier in this panel. I just want to fess that up right now in the sense that these are titans of industry leading big B2C brands. And I have a slightly unusual role in that I run an exclusive series of conferences, a little bit like Milken, that really are about synthesizing the best things that are happening in industry and then bringing those conversations together. So Michelle, thank you for having me as the sort of the oddball out. What am I hearing? I'm hearing you guys talk about brands like it's assumed, right? But actually putting value on brand now more than ever. I think conformity is the enemy of growth, says JFK, and actually there's stagnant growth. We need brands, marketing now more than ever. I think there was a McKinsey report last year that said CEOs that have marketing at the heart of their strategy are 3 times more likely to have plus 5% growth. So I would say it, I'm WPP, we do marketing, but if you listen to our clients, CEO of Coca-Cola, James Quincy, he'd say marketing is their motor for growth. And that's certainly what we're seeing. So I think you need marketing and you need a brand in order to have that loyalty.
Awesome, awesome. So when I think about loyalty, I think of it as something that is earned, not given. And I'm a former competitive athlete, and I draw a little bit of a parallel between the practice in the gym, the training, the film study. You do all of that to earn a place on the team, to earn your playing time, to earn your success on the field or on the court. But in order to do that, you cannot take shortcuts. And when it comes to how your fans or your consumers experience your brand, whether it is a product or a service, all of those touch points matter. So whether they're engaging with the product, whether they're engaging with an experience, whether they are seeing some of your storytelling and your meaning making, you have to take all of those incredibly seriously. You can't take any shortcuts because you're either adding to that brand loyalty, or you're potentially detracting from it. And working at Levi's, I think you think about the apparel industry or category, you have a little bit of a higher bar relative to services, for example, where we all have a bit of our personal identity associated with what we put on our body. It's almost like a bit of a badge. So there's this combination between the meaning that you make connected to your product, associated with your brand, and the stories you tell, as well as each one of those touch points that they have, whether it is actually contributing or pulling away from their affinity towards the brand. Those combined really help to drive loyalty in a meaningful way.
Firstly, Michelle, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of MasterCard. And I would come at it from a completely different angle, and a little radically different, I would say. I wrote a book about 3 years back called Quantum Marketing, which went on to become a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and I feel very grateful for it. Got published in 11 languages. One of the chapters I wrote in that book is called Loyalty. And the gist of that is loyalty is a myth. Loyalty does not exist. Research after research has shown that in people's personal lives, when they were asked how loyal were they to their spouses or to their partners, an overwhelming 70% have admitted that they do cheat or have cheated on their partners. And a further 15% have said that if they are sure they will not be caught, they don't mind straying.
Wow.
Which is 85% of the people are not hardwired for loyalty. And if people are not hardwired in their own most important, most personal relationships, we, coming as brands, giving 5% cash back, 2 reward points for every dollar you spend, or expecting that buy one, get one free, that people are going to be loyal to us, we are kidding ourselves. And we are literally flushing more than $1 trillion down the drain every single year as an industry behind loyalty. We need stickiness. We need repeat purchase. We need people to think positively about our brand, but don't misunderstand that to be loyalty. It is not.
I'm with Raja. Forget loyalty. Hi, I'm Amy Tunick. Thank you, Michelle, for having me. I work at National Cinemedia, which is the cinema advertising platform. And it's a B2B company, but it's a unique thing because everybody loves the movies. So even though we're selling to media buyers and marketers in terms of a time on our screen and experiences in our theater lobbies, everybody that we sell to understands the movie-going experience, and they are a consumer too. So when we're trying to build loyalty for our company's brand and obviously create relationships with our clients, what do? We bring them to the movies, and we help them have the experience that ultimately they are hopefully buying to then, have their advertisers experience that too. So we put them in screening events, we bring them to the Sundance Film Festival, and by creating that experience for them, ultimately they remember what it is they love the most about the movies, and that helps us build loyalty with our clients.
Thank you. So interesting. Obviously, trust is really important, but loyalty is hard to come by, and it seems like we're all competing. Raj, I'm going to start with you. Joe just said here that it's hard to have a campaign that's going to last for 3 years. much less, or 3 months, much less 3 years. But I actually want to take us back 27 years, and I think you know where I'm going to go with this, but MasterCard introduced the world to the idea that there's some things money can't buy, and for everything else, there's MasterCard. And I think that that is often looked at as, kind of the playbook for brand marketing, and it's really allowed you not just to put a tagline out there, but then to put the experiences behind it. So this is a bit of a two-part question. First, about MasterCard and the brand loyalty and the Priceless campaign, and how that's remained so resilient over so much time. But then to your point about loyalty, I know MasterCard released their first eventful economy report recently, and you focused on the Swift lift. And I'd love to just get your thoughts on if Taylor Swift is one of those exceptions to brand loyalty, and a little bit about the impact she had on everything from, the community businesses where the concerts were taking place to the behemoth that is the NFL.
Let me start with the second one, if you don't mind.
Please.
Right? I haven't seen any data. I have been now working in the field of marketing for almost 39 years around the world. I have been in different geographies. And I haven't seen anything at all the way one single individual, other than the Fed governor, Fed chairman, who of course can move things around with the interest rates, but as an individual, this lady is moving economies unbelievably. So we actually track which city has she gone to, and the moment she's announced her concert, how the pickup happens in terms of spending. It's unbelievable. When she visits a town, the sales go up by more than $100 million because people are coming in, they're staying in the hotels, they're eating at restaurants, they're buying merchandise. It's completely crazy. So 3% lift in terms of the GDP is what we are seeing. Absolutely unprecedented as far as I see it. And I think we are still trying to figure out exactly what are the various drivers, because if you are talking in terms of moving economy, not just moving an individual company's brand market share or anything of that sort, there are significant learnings, and she has nailed it. If there were a Nobel Prize in terms of economics, she probably should get that. And I'm saying, it's unbelievable. So this is one. But coming back to the first one, I generally tend to agree with Joel, which is basically that it's very difficult to have campaigns last for a long time. But campaigns will last a long time if you touch upon some fundamental human truths that are not changing, because they are fundamental and they are human truths, they remain steady. And if you align yourself with those and focus on those values, you don't have to change. Now, this is the second time in my career that I have seen that. First is, of course, with MasterCard. The one before that was I created a campaign called Celebrate with Asian Paints, which lasted for 17 years. The concept was simply Celebrate with Asian Paints. Here, when we talk of Priceless, the campaign seems very counterintuitive. What you are saying is, when you are sort of going to any place and are with your son, a baseball game or whatever, focus on spending quality time with that person. That is what is priceless. For everything else, there is MasterCard. You're almost sort of relegating yourself to a secondary or even a tertiary space. I'd say we are there for you, we got your back, you just go, you enjoy your life. And we start focusing purely on that individual and the priceless moments in their lives. Now, but if you simply keep saying the same thing over the years, it gets very stale. And people will say, okay, what's new? Now, this is now getting repetitive. So in 2013, that was exactly the situation that we were in. Extremely well-liked and well-recognized campaign, but needed a refresh. And as a new CMO who joined MasterCard at the time, my choice was either to change it or to evolve it. And evaluation was very, very difficult. So what we did was essentially to take it from being just an advertising campaign to make it a holistic marketing platform, which is not just celebrate moments of pricelessness in people's lives, but enable priceless moments in people's lives. So we came up with campaigns like Priceless Surprises and so on and so forth. And the third level then we went was, which is what actually gave it the biggest boost, it's not just about priceless moments, but it should be about priceless movements. So we started getting behind concepts like Stand Up to Cancer for cancer research, feeding poor children through with World Food Program, Priceless Planet to sustain for the sustainability and environment and so on. And it started resonating, and it was breathing fresh life into the campaign every single time that we were doing this. But we are sticking to the core, and we have been continuously evolving. And I would say that's what really enabled us. And you're right, this is the 27th year of Priceless campaign.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Ella, do you see a difference between advertising and entertainment anymore? Like, is there a line between selling a product and selling a feeling?
No, absolutely not. And all of you in the room know it, because you're listening a bit to us, but you're also feeling, right? You know how you feel in relation to us. It's 8:30 in the morning. If you've woken up, are you listening yet? Are we looking at you? We're thinking about you? Are we saying what we already thought about? You know, David Ogilvy, one of the giants of our industry, said, you can't save souls in an empty church. And that was like 50 years ago, right? That's not like a new insight from last week. But it's true for our clients. You know, Verizon, who work with Ogilvy on the Super Bowl. What was the Super Bowl? 123 million views or something? I forget. They work with Beyonce on that campaign, right? Can they break the internet with Beyonce? It's mad. It's just fun. You want to watch it. And it's true as what we do. You know, at WPP, our clients are you guys, are brands, are business leaders. So how do we create forums where you actually learn, where you think, where you contribute, where we listen to you, where you feel like we care about you? So no, I think the feeling is everything. And again, it's the Maya Angelou quote, you know, you forget what people say. You remember how you feel.
But you remember how they make you feel.
Right? That. And
That's
so
right.
that's sort of the question out to you all. How do you want to feel?
Yeah.
Who's doing the feelies for your company? I don't know, but it's like, it's everything, I tell you.
Amy, can you pick up on that a little bit? Last year was box office topped $4 billion. So clearly movies are back. You offer a captive audience, but I'm curious to know how expectation has changed now post-pandemic for what it is that you offer.
Well, no matter what the pundits say, the movies are not going anywhere. They're a 100-year-old business. COVID, we're here. Strikes, no problem. You know, the DVR, no big deal. So people just love going to the movies. And I'd say the next evolution of what's happening in the movies is that experiential nature, and especially in a post-COVID world. People love to make memories with their friends and families. It's building on what Ella just said. And so the movie is going to the movies is such an immersive experience, but now it's more than that, especially with people like Taylor Swift dropping in for a nice Q4 event for us. I mean, they buy the ticket, they see the trailer, they buy the ticket, they plan it with their friends and family. Then they go. Then when there's Barbie, they dress up in pink. Or when there's Taylor, they trade friendship bracelets in the lobby. They see the movie. It's wonderful. It's an experience. They make a memory. They post about it, because if you didn't post it, it really happened. But the experiential nature that the consumers have, that's what brands and marketers are tapping into now more than ever. It's also turning a campaign into a multi-platform, feeling for the brand and in everything you live and walk and do. So whether it's a lobby activation, whether it's a 15-minute long-form brand film that's leading up to the trailers in the feature, and they're taking over, whether it's a screening event with influencers and media, that's how brands are now evolving. And the movie business, as it continues to come back from whatever the last thing is that hit us down, brands are going to take it to the next level. 1 out of every 2 18 to 34-year-olds goes to the movies every year. They're driving the box office. It's young, diverse Gen Zs, and that's who brands want. So we'll just keep riding the wave.
Well, and Amy, you talk about it being, the experience, but I think critically it's the shared experience. I think going to see the Taylor Swift concert film was for many people recreating or creating the actual concert experience that they weren't able to have. She wasn't in their market, that sort of thing. I actually went with some friends to see Creed last year, which is like totally not the type of movie I think I would see. But there was something about the whole audience watching these boxing scenes where you felt like you were in the arena together. And that was just something that watching it at home, would be very difficult to replicate. So I think, what Ella's talking about, that blurred line between, brand and feeling and product and emotion, that's one of those things where people can kind of come together and collectively
Yeah.
embrace something.
And just one note on Taylor while we're on her. 2 million people went to her concert. 15 million people saw her movie for 1999. So it democratized the
Right.
experience in such a way. And that, I mean, I went with my kids and it was multi-generational and everyone's screaming and standing and screaming and singing. And I mean, it really is a way to kind of bring that shared experience to life. And it's affordable and it's around the corner at the cinema.
To take it a layer deeper, I think something that's really interesting that I think could create some good discussion is, when you think about, Viral Nation worked recently with A24 on the release of Civil War, right? And in talking to those guys, they've obviously been really successful over the last couple of years. But one of the things that resonated with me, speaking to creatives in the movie industry, is they're almost at bay or at will to social media, and they know it. Right, so you end up in these conversations where they're like, I need to create this social tidal wave in order to get folks to the movie.
Well,
right?
I was going to go to you next. The creator economy, hundreds of billions of dollars. I thought it was interesting. 17 million people watched the Grammys this year. Alex Earl's series of TikToks getting ready for the Grammys had anywhere from 3.7 million to 8.7 million views each. So I really wanted to understand what's going on here. I mean, each of these TikToks had half the viewership of the actual Grammys, and it was her getting ready to go to the Grammys. So is that what you're talking about? Like, what is the viral nature behind it?
Yeah, when you think about what's happening, it's actually quite simple, right? We went through this curve in creativity and media where, I always use this example. If you watch the first Fast and the Furious movie, it was just a bunch of guys with souped up cars racing on the highway. If you look at the last Fast and the Furious movie, it's a guy jumping out of a cargo plane with a car, doing barrel rolls, hitting a thing and somehow landing, right? So media and production moved us along this very highly produced curve, almost to the point of us getting tired of it, right? And then along came the influencers who almost grounded almost everybody in this reality that they can have that relatable connection with someone and watch something just the same. And I've been screaming from the rooftops for a long time that I think a lot of people originally believed that influencers were just a new type of celebrity, right? They're mini Leonardo DiCaprio's in the making, right? But I think that they're just the modern media for young people. And I think that somewhere along the way, young people said, I don't want to see the barrel rolls out of the airplane. That doesn't seem real to me. But they'll tune in to watch one of our YouTubers for 45 minutes do a video that cost him $50
Right.
that he edited himself.
Yeah.
And I would argue that sometimes when, regardless of the content quality or the content duration or people are going to people just like themselves to watch that content. And when you actually start to sum the numbers together, Viral Nation, we're so fortunate. We were in the influencer space for almost 10 years now. So we represent over 1,000 creators. And if you pooled their weekly YouTube numbers, it's 16 times the Super Bowl, right? And what's interesting is it's somehow we've kind of thought that this is a passive viewership experience, and the real viewership experiences are Super Bowl. But I would argue that when I get home at night and I throw on my favorite YouTuber to watch that with my kids before I go to bed, is very much the same thing as me watching The Voice.
Right.
So I really think that creators are just a new form of media that young people enjoy consuming, and it's endless in its possibilities of what you can watch and how you can watch it. And because creators don't have, when the strike happened in Hollywood, I actually thought to myself, that's not a good move for them, because they're actually creating room for the creators to keep going.
Yeah.
Right? Because what would cost a studio to make a 3-part series millions of dollars, a creator's creating for a couple $1,000s that he's recouping immediately, and he's doing with a 2-person team. So I think at some point we need to kind of distill the reality of content quality versus the value of it.
Right.
Because if folks are spending 42 minutes watching a not well produced video of a kid doing trick shots, that's the same attention, if not more, than the produced content that we put media and ads behind today. So I truly believe that example of the Grammys is, folks are spending 4 hours a day watching these folks, and the Grammys is a long thing. I'm going to tune in, I'm going to hop out, I'm going to tune in. But if you actually summated all of the content they watched during during that period, it's earth-shattering. It's just no one's gotten to the level yet to report on it like we've kind of become used to with traditional and normal media.
Yeah, I just have to chime in on that because everything you're talking about in terms of content creators is exactly what the news business is facing as well too. When you think about people like Taylor Swift and Beyonce and athletes even, who are the athletes and superstars of journalism? Does anyone have a person that you follow? Do you have a favorite journalist that you totally trust? And that's, I mean, what we're finding is the same types of behaviors that we're talking about here are very pertinent in media. Talked about building trust. Well, we trust people.
Right.
Don't necessarily trust institutions and media institutions in the way we used to. So it's really imperative that we think about this aspect of not just entertainment, but trust. And like, you trust this person for information, you know them, you know what they talk like, you know what they sound like, you know when you can expect to hear from them, they're approaching you in the right way. And on the content creator side, the other imperative for us is that it's not only journalists who are creating news. The majority of our kids are following news from people who are not traditional journalists. They haven't gone to journalism school. They're content creators on TikTok. They're content creators on Snap. They're in other places. And so that's just something that we think about constantly in terms of our evolution as an institutional brand.
Well, to build on that as the social guy, you know, I think one of the fears I've always had is that young people aren't validating the information, obviously, as rigorously
Correct.
as we
Yes.
were taught to. So my fear is, yeah, the TikToker we represent goes out and says, you know, the sky is falling.
Yeah.
And the young people who are following them are not taking the steps we used to validate.
Yes. And that is what we have to solve for.
Yeah, and I want us to dig into this a little bit more when we talk to the election in particular, because that's where that becomes really critical to do that. But before we move on, Kenny, I just wanted to get your thoughts. I saw the denim vest in a whole new light when I saw it on Ryan Gosling. So from Coachella to Cowboy Carter, do you just want to talk a moment about Levi's and how you integrate your touch points with entertainment?
Yeah, absolutely. So Levi's has a pretty long and rich history in the space of entertainment, in the space of sports, in the space of music. And one of the ways that we actually work, I'd say broadly with the industry and do it in a fairly organic fashion, is through a network of spaces that we have called the House of Strauss. Very cool name. And what it is, it's actually not a consumer-facing space. It's a bit of a showroom as well as a kind of a fitting area with tailors. And we have them around the world. We actually have one here in LA that is right off of Hollywood Boulevard, it's right off of Sunset Boulevard, about a block and a half from Chateau Marmont. We have one in London, we have one in Mexico City, we have one in Tokyo, Japan, and we also are building one in Paris. And what they are actually like our inroads into entertainment, into sports, and into music. So for example, at the House of Strauss here in LA, we work very, very closely with stylists, with costume designers, with talent themselves, with creators and influencers. And we actually will have a space where we'll curate a fitting experience for our talent directly. We will foster relationships directly with costumers. We'll foster relationships directly with stylists. So it's actually not an accident when you see Ryan Gosling in Barbie rocking the denim vest. It's because we have a strong relationship with his costumer, right? And it's not something, it happens very organically. He likes the brand, his costumer likes the brand. So as you guys are watching your next Netflix show, which you watch on broadcast television, you happen to see someone, one of my favorite shows on Netflix is Top Boy, and you'll see Duchesne, the character, run down the alley, and he's wearing these black Levi's. That wasn't because Levi's was a sponsor of that show. It's because we built relationships with the talent directly, with the stylist directly, and with the costumers directly. So that's one of like our very organic ways of building those relationships and how it shows up in film, it shows up in television in really powerful ways.
That's terrific. We're going to segue to entertainment, to environment. But Kathy, I want to give you 30 seconds. The Washington Post won 3 Pulitzer Prizes yesterday, and congratulations.
Thank you so much
on that. I'd love to just give you a minute to talk about that.
Of course. Well, thank you. It was a great day yesterday for journalism. And yesterday, the Post was the recipient of 3 prizes. The first was for the American Icon series, which is an investigative study on the impact of the AR-15. The journalism that we did, we made some really tough choices in terms of what we decided to cover and how we presented that, with a lot of transparency involved. It's very hard to look at. It's upsetting. But it really does provide critical information that the public needs to know. So just really over the moon about that one.
That was beautiful.
And the compelling visuals and graphics are just
something you hadn't seen before.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The 2 others are really quick. One is editorial writing. David Hoffman won on behalf of a series that he wrote on autocrats' use of digital technology to suppress dissent against particular regimes. And then the last one was commentary by Vladimir Kara-Murza, who is a contributing columnist and a political activist. He spoke out against the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and has been imprisoned, is sentenced to 25 years. So his wife, Evgenia, came to the Post yesterday, spoke on his behalf, and it was really just a meaningful it's the reason I get out of bed every day. It felt so good. So I'm just really, really proud of the journalism.
That's fantastic.
Thank you for letting me say that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So segueing to environment from @postclimate on Instagram, Climate202, and This is Climate. You all have invested a lot in climate storytelling. What are you hoping to achieve, both by telling those stories and by hopefully, educating and activating your audiences? What is the outcome you're hoping for as a result of that?
I think the key words I would say are awareness and impact. Several years ago, 5, 10 years ago, unless you lived in certain locations, you as a general everyday person may not have fully understood or experienced the impact of climate change. But go to the fires of 2020 on the West Coast, the skies turning orange in San Francisco and Portland, Oregon, the fires that happened on the East Coast. The sky turning orange in New York was a new experience that people hadn't had before. The flooding, the impacts of extreme weather. I think one of the things we realize is that over time, the fact we had covered this for years and decades, but in 2022, we made a conscious decision to put climate on the navigation and create a section around that. And part of that is the products that Michelle mentioned here. Another thing that we do hope to achieve with the work is to make climate accessible and relatable. There's some, large stories. If you go to the Post today, you'll see like the impacts of flooding in Brazil, but you'll also find smaller stories that impact you personally. So how do I access nature? Like what's my nature score in terms of where I live in a city, and why is nature beneficial to me as a person, beneficial to the environment, et cetera? Other things are on invasive plants. So I think from the very highest levels of major disasters that are happening to policy change and that impact, which the Post is very known for, to the everyday kind of things that we need to know as consumers. We have a climate coach who's particularly engaging. I encourage you to follow him, Mike Corin, and he will get into very specific things around what people can do on a daily basis to impact decisions that you make in the way you live.
That's amazing. And are you seeing good engagement?
Tremendous engagement. Both, I would say, from a consumed standpoint in terms of what people are reading, but also in terms of, the Washington Post, we're a business. We have a lot of advertisers that we, work with in terms of partnerships to provide everything from live programming, live journalism, to different ways that they might appear on our properties. And climate is at the very top of the portfolio in terms of what our partners are looking for.
That's great. Yeah. Raja, I want to take it back to you because I know this is something that you're very passionate about, both work that you're leading within MasterCard and then using that to activate even larger work. So if you could just talk a little bit about the initiatives, Planet Pledge and the Priceless Planet Coalition, and similar to Kathy, from a even just broader industry standpoint, what it is that you're hoping to achieve and the change that you're looking to effectuate.
Got it. So, firstly, I am a trained environmental engineering student, done it about 40 years back. And I've also done my MBA in environmental management. So this is a topic which is very, very close to my heart, long before people started talking about environmental degradation and so on. So a couple of things I have been personally leading. One is in my voluntary capacity, I serve as the president of the World Federation of Advertisers, which collectively have got practically every single big brand is a member of that. And we created what we call as Planet Pledge, basically to give marketers playbooks as to how they should be tackling environment from their own perspectives, why it makes business sense. It's not just for the goodness of heart, but actually it's also sound business for you as a company. And there are some shocking statistics in that which people don't even realize. For example, if I put an advertisement in newspaper A versus newspaper B, there could be differences as much as 15 to 16 times more carbon footprint for one particular newspaper versus the other one. You might think it print medium is all the same, but no, it's very different. Same thing is true with the digital as well. And so this is one part of it. Second, for most of the companies, and we have done this much more extensively in the financial services space, the single largest contributor to carbon footprint is marketing. And almost 1/3 of all the emissions happen because of marketing programs. So we said, therefore, we need to actually assume that responsibility and do something about it. So this playbook is actually, we created that and we distributed to all the marketers saying that this is how you should go about it. Do you know, firstly, what is scope 3 as an example? And how do you hold your vendors accountable to be responsible from an environment point of view? So that, because as marketers, we have a ton of influence on our vendors, on our partners, and in general on our ecosystem. So how do you leverage that power for the betterment? So this is one part of it.
May I ask a question? So are you then referring to the ISSB standards? Is that what you're trying to share when you talk about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions?
We are not setting standards.
But are you, when you're sharing that information about the impact of marketing, is that through the lens of the ISSB?
As well.
Yeah.
But not only.
Oh, okay.
So what we are trying to do is we are trying to simplify the entire thing, because many of the marketers, like many of the consumers, have a very low span of attention. And not everyone is a deep believer that environment is actually going down the tube in a very bad way. So therefore, what we wanted to do was firstly create an awareness, and secondly, establish the linkages between what you as a marketer are doing and what actually is the impact on the environment, and therefore what should you be doing, and how should you even go about it? How do you even set your objectives? How do you tell your story? How do you justify your investment into something which is a little bit more probably expensive in some cases by going route A as opposed to route B to get the same end business results? So we have actually done a ton of stuff around this. This is one part of it. Number two, at MasterCard, we have about 100,000 banks which are our clients. So as a company, we don't issue credit cards or debit cards. Though you think that MasterCard is a credit card company, we don't issue a single card. We are a technology platform that banks use to issue whatever cards they want and charge whatever they would want. So we have got that whole collection of banks as our customers. We also have got close to 100 million merchants that we have got around the world who accept a MasterCard. So we said, is there something that we can do with the network itself that we have got, or we are at the center of, to create some movement around environment? So that's where we launched this entire initiative for MasterCard called Priceless Planet. And we start creating a whole bunch of initiatives and matching contributions with what some of our banks do, with some of our customers do. We have done a lot of auctions. Like, for example, we sponsor, say, UEFA Champions League, or we sponsor MLB All-Stars or World Series. We actually raise funds for environmental protection or even rehabilitation of the endangered animals and so on using our platforms. One of the things which I'm personally passionate about is animals. And I said, how do you really protect animals? And it's so sad to see so many animals disappearing right in front of our eyes every single day. And these are not some small insects that you don't even know that they exist in the first place, but these are right majestic beasts. Like, for example, the Sumatran tiger is going to vanish by 2027. So what we did is we created a whole card. It's called Wildlife Impact Card. So each time you use that card or you get that card, a part of our profits, we actually give it to Conservation International, who then use that money to either rehabilitate the habitats of these animals and also give things like monitoring equipment for the rangers, for the forest rangers, because poaching is very horrible. So we're trying to tackle it, whether it is for animals, whether it is for emissions, whether it is for carbon removal, whether it is carbon offsets. It's a whole holistic program, and we are committing significant funds as a company to this entire planet, Priceless Planet coalition that we are doing it.
And is the idea there that it can't be one size fits all? So you have a number of different initiatives so that people can kind of come in and make that impact in whatever way makes sense for them.
Exactly. See, like for example, I'll just give you it brings a smile to me every time I think about it. So one of my colleagues in a previous company used to say, Raja, why the hell do you care about polar bears? There are so many people and kids who are dying. Instead of focusing on them, you're looking at polar bears. It's different strokes for different folks. Different things appeal to you, right? So if I start showing kids and not polar bears, maybe some of the people won't get equally moved on that. But the point is, trees, they seem to be completely inanimate to many people. You just sort of keep burning down woods or chopping forests. Some people, they're totally okay with it, or they're unaffected by it. Right. So no point in focusing on that. Focus on something which appeals to them and try to get this movement going. And that's been our approach. And so far it's been gratifying, but the results are nowhere as good at the industry level where we need to be, because the deterioration and the degradation is pretty horrible right now.
I'd like to keep the conversation going on the industry, Ella. In 2021, WPP signed the Climate Pledge. I'd love to just hear from you, world's largest advertiser, what led to that and what that means in terms of how WPP does business, but also how you do business with and for your clients.
Controversial. I'm going to tell a fun story on the topic of sustainability.
Great.
Washington Post, credit to them. Kathy and her team invited me to join a recent event they did in Miami, and I got the best text I think I've ever gotten at an event, which was a picture of, was it Mike Curran, holding an iguana on the beach in Miami, going, do you want to come and eat an iguana? I'm like, sorry, what? It turns out iguanas are an invasive species in Florida, right? So actually he has a whole column going in the Washington Post at the moment about how you understand what's an invasive species in your local area and how you can eat it. So that, for me, I didn't eat the iguana. Sorry, I should probably just say I don't even think they cooked the iguana because there was various health and safety. But that, for me, was a masterclass in the storytelling around the importance of climate change and how you can make it very real and personal. For WPP, it's not an add-on. It's integral to our business. And everything, Raja, you just said about the weight of impact is thought about very carefully at WPP. From our own point of view, we've reduced CO2 emissions 18% last year. And since I think our benchmark in 2019, we're down 78%. So we take our own credentials very seriously. We also look at it from innovation, right? So we have a massive production arm business called Hogarth. They look at it in terms of virtual production. You guys might have seen the Boston Dynamics dog, Spot the Dog. Have you seen Spot the Dog? And it kind of moves around. It's a bit creepy. And you're like, what do I do with Spot the Dog? Well, we can use Spot the Dog because then we can do virtual production. So we're not sending 100 people on a shoot to do a car video in Scandinavia. We're sending Spot. So there's various bits of innovation that it prompts in our business. And again, Group M have done a massive piece of work. Sorry, it's our media buying business about Carbon Calculator. How do you understand which newspaper is going to impact your own carbon reporting? So we take it very seriously in terms of the reporting and innovation. The best bit, though, is when it comes through on the work, because that's where, again, you get back to the storytelling, the iguanas. And I think if I think about where it's been done really well, it's the surprising bits, like Dove Real Beauty, fighting toxic ideas of what beauty standards are for women. That's been going since the early 2000s. It's absolutely amazing. It's on at the Super Bowl this year. Another wild one at the Super Bowl this year for Unilever with Hellmann's mayonnaise. I don't know if you saw it with Kate McKinnon, the actress, and a cat that goes meow, meow, mayo. It kind of goes mayo, and it's mayonnaise, and it's prompting you to use mayonnaise to reuse leftovers and cut food waste. These are extraordinary campaigns that it's very easy to miss the impact on, but it's behavior change at the end of the day. And we take that very seriously. So yes, it's very important, and there are some real leaders on this panel aside from us, but would love to also hear about how you're doing it in your own business, because I think it's easy to think it's just big business that does it. So if after this talk you've got 5 minutes to catch up, I'd love to hear more from all of you as well.
Great. Okay, Kathy, so you started to dip your toe in the election conversation, and we're going to bring it back to that. So $15 billion is estimated to be spent on advertising leading into this election, no doubt much of it with Ella and her team. I would love to know what responsibility does the Washington Post have in general, but especially in an election year, from a storytelling perspective, from an education perspective? You obviously have the ability to engage people in a way. You've won now 3 Pulitzers. Does it change the relationship that you have with your audience?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't think so. The Washington Post's utmost ambition is to basically hold power to account. That's what we stand for. That's the mission of journalism. And so when it comes to elections, I think this year there are over 60 elections that are happening around the world, and I believe this is the largest election year the world has ever seen. So we take that seriously. I mean, that's a lot of opportunity for us to cover the truth. We are a national paper. We are read globally. I think one of the things that I experienced at Davos this year was, and when anyone found out we were with the Washington Post, people said, what's going to happen in the 2024 elections, no matter where that person was from around the world. And so I think that responsibility is not just to our own audiences in the States, but externally in terms of how global audiences are perceiving America and understanding America. And so that's a commitment that we want to honor. I think for the coming season, in terms of where we're at, I mean, and this is just really across every piece of journalism that we do, but are we reaching the right person with the right information in a place that they want to be reached? And I mean, that's just the basics and the foundation of marketing, of communications. Do we have the right products? The other thing I would say is just to touch on the Taylor Swift impact and what I talked about with journalism. Are our journalists known? Mm-hmm. Do you know these journalists in your common every day? Do you trust them? Do they make themselves accessible to you? And so that work around the person and the presence of that person is also really important to us. From a product perspective, we're doing more in the way of dedicated newsletters. We're covering the Trump trials, and so we launched a series of products around what that looks like. So a newsletter, a podcast, et cetera. And that format is just something that can be stood up in any part of the election that becomes topical and timely. The other thing we also have is a growing TikTok channel. So if you don't follow the Washington Post on TikTok, it is super fun. It includes both personalities in terms of people that you see on a regular basis who are creating the content. They're also taking hard and serious news and cutting it and communicating it and putting it out there in ways that are so clever and engaging. So that's another place that I think is an important thing to watch in terms of how we're reaching Gen Z audiences. And lastly, I would just say, I think it goes back to our ability to be timely and relevant in the moment. And so there's a lot about the election right now that we know, and there are a lot of things that we don't know. And that's the basics of news. What we think we're going to cover for the week might not be what we end up covering fully for the week. There are lots of things that can pivot and turn. But fortunately, we're experienced in this. We've been doing it from the beginnings of the Washington Post. I think the shift today is in making sure that we get that audience, that content to audiences in places where we're not expecting them to come to the homepage of the Washington Post.
Well, and I want to dig in on that. So 41 million members of Gen Z are going to be able to vote in this election, 8 million of whom were actually not eligible to vote when the 2022 midterms occurred. So that's a whole bunch of people that need education. You talk about TikTok. I do follow Washington Post TikTok. It is very good. But the way for that to be successful is it has to blend into the content on the platform. And I'm going to bring in Joe on this in a minute. But how do you do that, right? How do you signal to the audience and that what you are presenting is the truth and the next person in the algorithm is opinion? Yeah. And probably most of what they see is opinion. So how do you have a responsibility or a role in kind of educating the audience about how to, Joe was talking about this, but how to gauge the relative truth of what's being presented to them?
I mean, I think it kind of goes back to the people. I mean, I think that's the other, people trust people. So the people we have on TikTok, the personalities that we have on TikTok are journalists. These are not just comedians who are getting up and creating content. They're not just the people who are in social platforms, influencers. They are trusted journalists who have journalism background and hold that work in the highest regard. So from a journalistic integrity standpoint, that's That is the mission of the Washington Post. That does not change by nature of how we cover it in TikTok. You know, for everything that we're doing, it's around work that is timely, topical, relevant. It's in the mainstream culture. You know, you can look today. I think there's a piece that Dave Jorgensen, he's one of the personalities and journalists on TikTok, who does a piece on the Trump trials and sort of how that's playing out. We recognize you have about, you know, half a minute to get somebody's attention in this time. First of all, from an attention span, but also in this platform. How do we use that to cover the news in a way that's going to meet somebody where they're at? It's also, I will say, there's a lens of humor that is baked into this, but it's not done. There are also ways that we can present very sensitive information that don't take away the humor, like without using humor, but it is a part of how we engage. We've talked a lot about entertainment as well, too. It's a very entertaining medium, and I think that's what people expect, that we're competing against the people out there that don't have journalistic integrity.
Right.
So I think that over time, learning how to put our personalities forward and building trust with audiences based on that, with the Washington Post under their name, is the way that we're doing it.
I love that.
Can I just put one quick point on
Sure.
this?
Yes,
what you said?
yes.
When you mentioned about the span of attention, that sort of struck me. It is not 30 seconds. It's actually less than 8 seconds.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
And it is less than that of a goldfish. So and that's true, actually. I don't know how they measured the attention of a goldfish, but they did, and that's what apparently it is. So what you're saying makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So, Joe, when Congress isn't trying to ban TikTok, the White House is inviting TikTok influencers to come and learn about their programs. So can you just talk about the role that you see of influencers playing in the election this year? And is that kind of the 2024 version of Rock the Vote?
Yeah, well, on the TikTok thing, I got invited to a White House briefing for the first time for the TikTok ban.
Oh, wow.
And admittedly, I called my mom. I'm Canadian. And I was like, Mom, made it to the White House. Canadian kid. But you know what? I think that, you know, social media's role, in my opinion, is everything. And it is going to play a major component in what happens here next. I think that, you know, if you look at it simply, right, if you had either candidate in an election who didn't have social media today, they would lose, right? So I think we understand the importance. I question a little bit of, you know, I agree with you on the integrity, but what's interesting about the influencer economy is sometimes we paint it with one brush, right? So there are large pockets of creators that live on YouTube and other platforms who are trying to actually do tons of research and back things, and they're almost like for the people, trying to kind of deduce what media is saying and et cetera. So you create this swirl where you have a lot of the traditional elements of an election that we know and love that are getting almost summarized and pushed into the machine, right? So you have that version. You have nonpartisan views from either side pouring into the machine. And then you have an everyday consumer with the attention span of a goldfish going, Trump's hair fell off. Right? So you create a very interesting and extremely dangerous situation.
Yeah.
Where, you know, we think about divide and the state of how folks are interacting today and all that. I would credit that to social media in a very big way. But at the end of the day, right, social media is now influencing people's decisions, not over the course of an election period, over the course of a day, right? We see that with our creators. We see that in the content we measure for our brands. We see that, right? So what one person might believe today could be drastically different tomorrow. And we kind of have adopted over the, you know, hundreds of years, you know, polling and et cetera. But, you know, one piece of information can change everything. So when you think about, to bring it to a brand perspective, if you recall the movie Bird Box, right? Maybe, you know, for me personally, and I didn't like the movie, but it got virality and became one of the highest viewed movies of the entire pandemic, right? So if you translate that to things like healthcare, you think about things like education, same thing can happen. Things can go viral, things can change opinion very quickly, things can trend. One of the fears in the White House briefing that the government had was you can place information on that platform intentionally in order to, you know, let's say the Wall Street Journal puts out a piece of content. You might have folks with really poor intentions trying to create content that outperforms that content, drowns it and shifts opinion. So I truly believe, and not to be, you know, scary, I think that we have very little control of what happens next. The election is close, and close in terms of time. And we have a real situation where we have the entire public spending 4 to 5 hours a day consuming information we have no filter on. And ultimately, it becomes a bit of a toss-up of what that's going to do, not only in the election, but to us and how we interact with each other and how we interact with brands and how we interact with media and et cetera. So I think that social's role in the election, especially influencers who, candidly, some of them are extraordinary. They understand the topics. They've invested in the topics. They're folks that I think you would love to have on your team at the Wall Street Journal. But there's also folks who are trend jacking or
Right.
want to say the things necessary in order to benefit themselves, but without understanding they're influencing 9 million Gen Zs a day while they do it.
Yeah, I mean, one person, one vote doesn't mean one educated vote, and I think that's the problem. Amy, do you want to talk about what the impact of all of this election ad spend is going to have on your business?
Yeah, well, the good thing is there's a lot of people that are probably not that interested in consuming information about the election every minute of every day because it is exhausting. And so they escape. And where do they escape? To the movies. We actually don't allow political ads in the movies. It's a partnership with our exhibitors because they want to maintain that stress-free escape environment. The good thing for us is that with the $10 to $15 billion of ads that will be spent in these traditional channels, that will displace a lot of advertising that hopefully will, come to our platform. But it is a moment in time. I spent 3 years working at CNN in between my advertising agency time and coming to National Cinemedia. And at CNN, it was 2017 to 2020, so it was a lot of things going on, the last big election, COVID, et cetera. And I had to go to the movies a lot during that time because it was very, very challenging to be working in that journalistic environment. And I applaud you, Kathy, and the team because it is difficult to just kind of take it in. But yeah, we plan to kind of be there as an alternative option for all of the brands during the next 10 months and really hopefully help consumers break it down and walk away when they need to.
Kenny, election, some brands don't want to weigh in on issues like that. Tell me, how does Levi's put a lens on what types of things that you decide as an organization are, kind of the bets you're going to place?
Yeah, absolutely. I have the privilege of helping to shepherd a brand that has been very values-led for quite a long time. It started with the brand's history. Levi Strauss, and his first profit he made on this business, he took $5 and actually donated it to an orphanage in San Francisco, which kind of began this philosophy around profits through principles by which the organization operates right now. And it's amazing to see when you talk about Gen Z and young folks and all of the research they do and the receipts that they collect. What they're often looking for is people whose words and behaviors are aligned. And proud to say that from Levi's perspective, that is true from the very beginning to in 1960, Levi's was the first organization to have a fully integrated factory in the South in Virginia, to Levi's being the first Fortune 500 company to offer same-sex benefits, to having the CEO actually handing out condoms in the lobby during the midst of the AIDS epidemic at its height. So Levi's as a company has always stood behind its values, whether it's connected to sustainability, whether it's connected to gun rights. I know that Chip, our former CEO, spoke last year here on gun rights, and when it comes to folks doing their civic duty. And we talk about Levi's being a bit of a platform for self-expression. There arguably is no better way to express yourself than to activate your right to vote. So just 2 weeks ago, we announced an initiative actually focused on junior colleges because there's actually a fairly big gap in terms of voter engagement and education and actually voting between four-year schools and junior colleges. So we have partnered with MTV as well as with Lyft lift and are doing a ton of activation around junior colleges to drive voter registration. And this is not new. So when you talk about receipts, last election cycle, we had a big above-the-line campaign connected to driving voter engagement in a very nonpartisan way. It's go out and exercise your right to vote, and it's very, very well aligned with Levi's values and its behaviors over time.
That's fantastic. Okay, last question, 30 seconds each. We'll start with Amy and make our way. We were very focused today talking about entertainment, the environment, and the election, but obviously everyone up here is dealing with many more issues, many more topics. What should we be thinking about? What is on your minds this year? What should be inspiring us, frightening us, surprising us? Amy.
I'm all about helping brands tell their stories in new ways. And so in a very fragmented media landscape, you have to surprise and break through with your message, and you need to do that constantly through innovating, whether it's long-form content, pop-up experiences, ways to surprise and delight your consumers. So I'm always looking for what's the next thing and how our brand's going to continue to communicate their stories in new ways.
Fantastic.
I would say that mental health is the one which is the most significant topic at the top of my mind, and I think it should also be the top of many other people's minds. It is not getting enough amount of attention that it deserves, and I think it's really getting to be very, very serious, and not just here in the United States, but globally, and that's something which we need to take it on a war footing. That would be my point.
I'd say that we are long past the day when consumers or fans are going to be, taking in your content, taking in your stories solely. We should be comfortable from a marketing perspective with sharing the pen, letting them co-author, and we talk about things from a creator or influencer standpoint. There's a big blurred line between a media platform and talent and a celebrity. So when you actually allow your fans and your consumers to share the pen, express themselves, actually show how they see themselves in your brand, like that is going to be kind of the power of the future when we think about things from a social media and digital perspective.
Oh, what Kenny said. I really, look, we all come to events like this to find something new, right? You sort of want the silver bullet. My hot take as direct as it can be is to stop turning rocks looking for new stuff, right? Be social, not clever. What all of us have said up here in different ways is it's human to human. And the more that we can create the space as businesses for our employees to shine as talent, for our clients to feel listened to, for the connective tissue of our organizations to work with our suppliers and partners, and to have a conversation with our users, with our audiences, that's it. You've got to keep it simple, stupid. You've got to talk to real people in a way that you would want to be spoken to with the respect that Kathy talks about at the Post. So, yeah, I think be social, not clever. You already know what the right answer is.
Awesome. And, I think for me, we have a real tenacity at our business to want to help to make the space be able to flourish for a long time, building technologies that allow us for brands to moderate and look at people's social histories to make them feel comfortable to want to work with them. And how do you start to moderate in a very fair way social media? Because I think File Nation's belief is that over the next 3 to 5 years, brands need to put social media kind of at the center of their business, because that's going to become the outlet of how they're having those one-to-one discussions all the time and being as close to the moment as they can. So, I think that this year and next year is going to see a lot of social media maturity, understanding social media in a much more value-driven way, and continuing to invest in people. To be able to tell the stories of brands, because they're going to tell it anyway. Might as well build relationships with them and give them the pen. So I think that would be my prediction.
I just want to give Kenny props for using the word co-author. I just think that's such a brilliant word and something I reflect on as well from the journalism space. We do have to be more comfortable knowing that there are people out there that don't have journalism degrees and that they are creating the type of news that our audiences, our shared audiences want. But I also want to use the word co-pilot. One thing we haven't gone deep on is AI, and it is really impacting my industry and all of your industries too in varying ways that I don't understand. I think the co-pilot word is a word that we use commonly at the Post in terms of how we think about embracing an opportunity that AI provides to do some of the things that help make our journalists do better work. I think the obvious fear is that there are certain spaces here, we've all talked about it, where AI can take the place of certain people going on shoots, et cetera. But where it comes to the intellect and the analyzation and the uncovering of investigative journalism, it does require humans. So we will look for AI to co-pilot us in how we move forward.
Wonderful. Well, it was an absolute treat for me to be up here with this panel today. I can't thank all of you enough for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. And I can't thank all of you enough for starting your day with us, for being part of this conversation. I hope you found some inspiring words today. And thank you. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
We hope you enjoyed the discussion. Please make your way to your next session.